Tonight on PhillyCAM Voices, we have 3 in-studio interviews produced by the fellows in the Community Journalism Mentorship Program. The Community Journalism Mentorship Program is a 6-month-long program where participants receive training in media production and build a portfolio of journalistic video pieces produced for television. Our guests this evening are Haleema Saadia, a member of PhillyBOLT, local artist Zoe Hicks, and Michael Mellon, an attorney with the Defender Association of Philadelphia. Good evening, and thank you for tuning into PhillyCAM Voices. I'm your host, Itzel Gonzalez. Isabella Aponte sits down with Haleema Saadia to discuss how a local Philly nonprofit empowered her and other young people to become voices of their community. She, along with other members of PhillyBOLT, recently hosted a mayoral forum to ask the Philadelphia mayoral candidates, will young voices be heard throughout this upcoming election? Welcome to the studio, Isabella and Haleema.
Thank you, Itzel. Thank you, Haleema, for being here. So you're a young member of the nonprofit organization PhillyBOLT. Can you tell us a little bit about their mission?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So PhillyBOLT is a local nonprofit that seeks to empower community leaders and youth in the city to bring about the changes they want to see. And there are a variety of ways in which they seek to do this. One of the ways is by providing training and curriculum to the leaders. And this is done through workshops as well as through longer programs that they host. And another way they empower community leaders is by bringing them together to create a network, because many of the issues that these leaders are fighting to change have the same root causes. So by creating a network, they can collaborate and address these causes collectively. And finally, they help connect these leaders to key financial resources that they can use to change their dreams for change into realities.
That's wonderful. So in the more recent times, we've seen a lot of conversation around the youth turnout and the impact that has in critical elections. In 2014 and 2022, we saw about a 19.5% increase. However, in the most recent primary electoral voting, we saw that kind of waning in Philadelphia. Why do you think that's waning? And do you think low engagement means low interest?
Absolutely not. I don't think the voting percentages have anything to do with lack of interest in politics. Rather, I think it's due to a disillusionment among the youth with these elected officials, because with the mayoral forum that we hosted at the very end, all the candidates were hesitant to come, and it really showed that although they had been promoting for youth-centered issues throughout their campaigns, they really were not willing to spend their time to listen to youth.
And in terms of local change, there's a lot of conversation about direct action versus voting. Do you think that one is impactful without the other, or do you think they go together?
I think they ultimately do go together, but I think direct action by youth is still impactful, even if there is a sense of disillusionment, because this action creates the pressures needed for the politicians to implement policies that the youth want to see. With that being said, I still think it's imperative that youth do participate civically and do take the opportunity to vote, because when they give that up, they're giving up their right to advocate for their interests.
Yeah, so your organization was in direct action and hosted a mayoral forum to highlight young voices and the concerns that they would like to see addressed in this upcoming election. Can you name some of those concerns?
Yeah, so we highlighted concerns such as education in the city, and then like public safety, as well as sustainability and climate change. And I think the issues that the youth cared most about were public safety and public education because these are the issues that are closest to the experiences of the youth with gun violence in the city and lack of funding in Philly schools. And some of the changes they wanted to see were to bridge these funding gaps within public schools and then to also implement community-oriented action to combat gun violence in communities directly by looking at the specific needs of each community versus the other communities, because there's no one-size-fits-all solution for this problem.
It's excellent to hear that young people are seeing the issues and bringing awareness to them and taking action. So you mentioned that there were some candidates that were a little more challenging to accept the invite, but the winner of the Democratic primary election, Cheryl Parker, was in attendance. How did she engage with the issues that young people were addressing at the forum?
So yeah, we did have a lot of hesitancy from the elected or the candidates in coming to the forum, and I think this was primarily due to the fact that many of the youth that organized the forum weren't of voting age, and also because the forum was specifically designed so the candidates couldn't use it to promote their campaigns. And I think this really says a lot about the concern of the candidates with just winning elections rather than actually listening to youth voices. And in the end, there were a lot of candidates that ended up coming, so the youth appreciated that. And since they weren't allowed to talk directly and promote their campaigns, they were instead asked to listen to the concerns of the youth, and they all appreciated that the youth were willing to put in the effort to communicate their ideas, and all of them said that they would implement the changes that the youth had suggested.
It's great to hear that they were responsive and at least listening to these issues. So we have a upcoming election. It's pretty historic, the 100th mayor of Philadelphia, and it may be the first woman mayor. So what are some ways that you would encourage young people in Philadelphia or people that work with young people, encourage them to get involved in this upcoming election?
I think there's a variety of ways for youth to get involved even if they're not of voting age. I think one of the biggest things they can do is work at the polls if they're 17 and older. And another thing they can do is get involved with local community organizations. And that way they can not only learn about the current mayoral race, but also just learn about how the government works in Philadelphia so they can better engage when they are of voting age. And finally, I think they can engage with reputable media to learn about the specific stances of each candidate.
Yeah, that's really important. And I know that sometimes, as a young person, you have a really busy life. I know you're a college student. So what are ways that you kind of make time to prioritize this type of engagement and education for yourself?
So I think for me, most of my political engagement has been done through community organizations that focus on the same issues that I'm passionate about. And through working with these organizations, I've curated a network of people like me who are interested in bringing about some of the same changes. And I think by having a community, it's more enjoyable and more lasting to stay engaged with politics in the city.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here. It was really insightful. So with us wrapping up, what are some ways that you would some things you would like to see change in Philadelphia with this upcoming mayoral election?
The biggest thing that I would like to see changed, and the thing that has, I think, impacted my life the most, was having educational opportunities to progress. And I think it's tragic to see that so many of the city's children don't have the specific resources that they need to progress through the educational system, and that's something that I would like to see focus directed towards.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how PhillyBOLT and yourself continue to engage in this upcoming election. Thank you so much for your insight. I really appreciate your time being here.
Thank you.
For our next interview, Kennedy Scurry talks to Philadelphia-based artist Zoe Hicks about her public artworks. Welcome to the studio to Kennedy and Zoe.
Hi everybody, my name is Kennedy Scurry and I'm here with mural artist Zoe Hicks. How are you today?
Good, I'm doing good. Peace, everybody.
It's so great to have you. So let's get right into it. So when did you start doing art and how does it make you feel every day?
Honestly, I just started doing art about it has to be like 9-10 years ago. But even as a kid, like my family was always into art. It was always around. It was just up until I decided to start like sketching for, just something to do, something to get my hands busy, something to get my mind off things. Like that's when I was like, you know what, let me just, kind of stick to this. And then it just started growing like a little bit more and more.
Okay.
And I'm like, wow, I like these colors. I like everything that's going on. Let me see. Like, and I realized like this is a talent that I have and let me try to like expand it.
Okay. So with your first sketchbook or your first canvas, like what was that moment like when you really did a piece that meant a lot for you?
It had to be like in the beginning when I started like learning things that I like to do. And I was like, I like eyes, I like faces, I like spiritual things, I like surrealism. I like expressing myself through art, through colors. So yeah, it was like in the beginning. It was a few pieces, so I can't really like.
Okay. So from the canvas to the city, what was it like painting your first mural?
What? It was this. So the one that they have on the screen, that's a community one, and that's my first mural right there. That's a community mural that I did on 40th and was it Lancaster? We just recently did that. That's a MLK tribute mural, and we're actually gonna do the mural that's on the new building that's being built on that property. But that's my first mural that I did, and that's the People Harvest. I was so scared because I didn't know anything about painting on big walls or. I just walked in blind and I was like, you know what, let me just show up and just be myself, and it just carried from there.
Okay. So when you paint and you use different colors, like what is that feeling like and what is the energy that you bring, when you walk in and you want to paint and you want to just paint the city color, like how does that feel for you knowing that you do this now at your age?
It feels exciting because not that many people can like turn their passion into something that they could do full time. Like I'm a full-time artist and it's not easy. Like I have days where like it sucks. Like, and then I still like, put like 8 to 10 hours into what I really want to do. So like, regardless, it feels really, really good to just wake up and say like, I can do this stuff. And like,
That's
I like
really
it.
good. That's really good. So how is it like working with other artists, knowing that they love doing what you love, but also knowing that you're full time? Like, what is that like day to day, every day for you?
I like working with my friends. It makes it more exciting. It makes me feel good. It fuels me. It uplifts me that I'm like helping the community and doing things like that. And the second part of the question
was like, how is it day to day for you to be a full time artist? Like when you wake up and you know that you want to paint, like what is that feeling like? And how is it like knowing that this is for you? Like what is it like knowing, you know what, I'm Zoe Hicks, this is for me and I want to do this all the time?
To be honest, I be asking myself that question every day. Like, it's like, am I really doing the right thing? But then I'm like, I constantly itch at it. I wake up in the morning, I set my intentions, I stretch, I really talk to myself sometimes, and I just start creating. Like, even if it's something small, I just started working on clothes. This is something that I just started making.
And please tell us more about the art on your clothes. Like, when did you make this piece and what does this piece represent for you?
The many sides and the many dimensions of self. I'm into science as well, so I'm also into neurographic art. I just started learning about that, so I just started putting some of that into it. Like I said, I'm into like spirituality and surrealism too, so I try to take like normal things and kind of put them in abnormal ways. So with this, it's just a head, which is, a spirit with many different sides, many different dimensions and feelings. So, yeah.
Okay.
And it's a bunch of different connections. Yeah.
And we also know that you work with mural art. So tell us about mural arts and what are like the pros and cons that come with it, and how do you feel about, those that look at art in a different, realm, like graffiti, painting, or painting on walls, as people would say. How is
Yeah.
that?
Working for Mural Arts is amazing. I also work for Amber Arts as well, and I really, really love Amber Arts a lot, both of them. I'm not really into like the art politics and stuff like that. Like I kind of just like found my way just by being eager and just wanting to connect and putting myself out there. It's honestly sometimes it's just about who you connect with.
Right.
Like you're really just 6 degrees away from whatever it is. You just gotta find that person. And I just kept going, and I found a mentor and started building from there. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know that.
And I know that being an artist can sometimes have its down days and you might have creative blocks. So how do you motivate yourself to get through those obstacles?
I started doing other things. I'm also a pianist,
Okay.
a writer. So those two things also help me like open up my mind in different ways, and it helps me also paint. Like, yeah, like when I have those creative blocks, it just means that like I need to express myself in other ways.
Okay. So where do you see yourself in like a year or 5 years from now with your art?
I see myself owning my own space, having a studio, a dog. Yeah, also curating more. I used to curate, and I would like to do that a little bit more so I can help other artists and stuff like that. You
Okay.
know?
Love to hear
Yeah,
it.
just try to expand.
And what is your greatest advice for people who want to get into art and are also struggling how to find their space within the art community or industry, I should say?
One, don't look at what you see on social media because the vision, that's their vision. Look at what you got to do and what you like to do, whatever it is, and just keep going at it. Even if it's just like, oh, I just wanted to give it 10 minutes today. Cool. You gave it 10 minutes. You didn't give it nothing.
Right.
So, like, yeah, just keep going. Like, however somebody else moves, that's how they move. How you move is your lane and your journey. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's my advice. Just keep going at it.
We love that. And with that being said, well, I want to say thank you for how you show for the community and the things that you do. We love to see you every day, and we want to see more from you. So I just want to say thank you for that. And
anytime.
also, how do you feel? So with your art studio, how do you feel about having your art studio and then doing things more for the community, and then going from there?
I feel good about it. I really
Okay.
want to, like, get that, like, on the road, to be honest. Like, so whoever can connect me in those ways, I'm all for it. Like,
Okay. But thank you again for coming. We appreciate it, and please keep up the great work, Zoe.
yeah, thank you.
Love you.
Thanks, everybody.
For our final interview this evening, Daniel Wilson sits down with Michael Mellon, an attorney with the Defender Association of Philadelphia, a nonprofit law firm committed to improving the fairness of criminal law and delivering high-quality legal representation to vulnerable populations. In 2016, Mr. Mellon founded the firm's Police Accountability Unit. He's here today to discuss the potential public safety policy reforms that could shape the city's future following the upcoming mayoral election. Welcome to the studio, Daniel and Michael.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
So can you tell me more about the Police Accountability Unit and what led you to create it?
Sure. So the Police Accountability Unit at the Defender Association of Philadelphia is a unit of 2 attorneys, myself and my colleague Paula Sen. We run the unit together. And we represent clients that cannot pay for criminal defense, that may have been arrested by police, the Philadelphia Police or other police departments in the city of Philadelphia. And the focus of our unit is to represent clients who are victims of systemic police misconduct. So we have a data analyst who helps us look at what the numbers tell us as far as where we might see racial disparities happening, and we try to incorporate that into the criminal defense of these people that were victims of police misconduct.
So we have an upcoming election, and the #1 issue in that election is public safety. One thing that has been talked about a lot is stop and frisk. Can you tell us more about stop and frisk?
Sure. So stop and frisk is kind of a legal term of art. It comes from a Supreme Court case from 1968, Terry versus Ohio. And basically what that court case said was that police needed to have a basis, a legal basis, to stop a person when they're walking on the street or driving in a vehicle, and that if they wanted to frisk that person, they needed to have a legal basis to believe that person was armed and dangerous. So they couldn't just have a hunch, they had to actually have what we call specific articulable suspicion. They had to actually be able to point to facts of what they saw to believe this person may have committed a crime, to stop them, and then if they wanted to frisk them, they needed to be able to say, oh, I saw something that made me think that person is actually armed and dangerous. So this means they can't search a person just on this basis, and they can't arrest a person on this basis, but it does give them a basis to stop them.
And historically, there has been a lot of racial disparity with stop and frisk practices. Can you tell me how you think stop and frisk will affect the Philadelphia community?
So, I mean, the other part about stop and frisk, I mean, I talked about what legal stop and frisk is, but there's also kind of what the colloquial idea of what stop and frisk is, and that's kind of this concept that police can just go up and stop you and search you, right? And I think a lot of people think that that's what it is. That's not the legal version of it, but that is kind of what was happening in New York City in the 2000s or so, in the 90s into the 2000s, where the leaders in the police department there and the political leaders, the mayors, were actually saying that people of color were to be stopped by the police and frisked without a legal basis. So, but the problem with even what we call, I guess, legal stop and frisk, what I was describing earlier, is that when you encourage police officers to perform pedestrian stops, when you talk about what their job is, if you ask them to go and just stop more pedestrians, what often ends up happening in that situation is you result in more people being stopped for lesser reasons than what is legal. So it gets very complicated, and you have to be very careful with how you police when it comes to pedestrian stops or vehicle stops, because you end up with these racial disparities. For example, our office focused a lot on vehicle stops and what policing was happening around vehicle stops. And what we found was, and this was prior to the pandemic, basically, historically, from 2014 to 2018, the Philadelphia Police Department stopped about 200,000 vehicles a year. They were massively racially disparate. But in the meantime, the city was sued for stop and frisk. And as a result of that, the plaintiffs and the city focused on pedestrian stops and trying to decrease their disparities. And what ended up happening is that they decreased those disparities starting in about 2016, but in 2018, late 2018, when those numbers got so low, what we ended up seeing was a rise in vehicle stops. Now, we never found out exactly why that was, but what we ended up finding was that before the pandemic, the police department was stopping 100,000 more vehicles now that they weren't making as many pedestrian stops. So it seemed like a shift happened. And so what we ended up seeing was many more people of color were getting stopped in vehicles, even though they were now not getting stopped as much on the street. And so you have to be very careful with how you implement any sort of pedestrian or vehicle stop program, because these racially disparate effects that happen when you encourage pedestrian and vehicle stops to increase.
So one idea that both candidates seem to be interested in implementing is the idea of community policing. Can you talk about community policing and whether you think that will help to discourage or prevent some of the racial disparities or problems that could arise with those sort of policies?
You know, community policing is another thing that it's very tricky, and you got to be very careful how you implement, because I think right now often what we see is you see a lot of police officers driving around in vehicles. They don't interact with the community. The community members don't know who their police officers are necessarily. You want to encourage an interaction with the community, I think, so they are comfortable with police, but you also don't want to over-police. You don't want to have the community feel like the officers that are walking around their neighborhood are basically an occupying force. So you need to balance and encourage, I think, and get police officers out of their vehicles so they're not just jumping out, so that they have a human interaction with the community. They build those bridges. But at the same time, you have to be careful not to just encourage the police to act like an occupying police force and stand on the corners and go after whoever might be in the community.
And lastly, do you think there's any middle ground between people who want a safer city and those who feel like safety doesn't come from having a higher police presence?
Well, I think we've been kind of talking about that back and forth right now, is that like there's a balance, there's a middle ground as far as making sure that, community policing, for example, you want to encourage people to have these interactions with their police officers so they know who they are, but you want, and for the police officers to also get to know who's in the community, but you also don't want it to just turn into an occupying force. So I think, to go back to what I was saying before, I think that's the tricky part, is like figuring out what the balance is on both sides of the fence there, where people are comfortable with both sides and where you're getting the results you want to get without getting the racial disparities, without creating the school to prison pipeline. You want to be very, very, very careful on how you do that.
All right, thank you so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning into this episode. Look out in the coming months for more stories from the Community Journalism Fellows. You can also watch our show on YouTube and Roku, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We'll see you next time. Bye.